Main event. Let's go. Ring the bell. Main event. This will be an interesting main event here, man. And I'm running an hour behind, but that's all for your benefit. Hopefully, we'll get you through your workday. We talked about this earlier in the stream about the person named Akash. If you guys don't know who Akash is, we'll show you briefly. He is a comedian. Right? Although I've never seen him in anything. He may have come across my Instagram here and there, but he is a comedian. He's a poor woman, and her name is Jasmine. All right, and they are Indian of native, South Asian of origin, nationality, Indian. And they are two young couples here that have been married. I believe there's an age gap between them, which is about 10 years, 8 to 10 years age gap. He was out of college when he met her. She was in college, and they tell some stories. She's telling a lot of stories about it. But Akash is a celebrity comedian, if you will, and he also is a member of a podcast. He just recently removed himself from. Jasmine is not a comedian. She's not an entertainer. So, but I believe she wants to be. What she's doing is trying to what we call parlay, capitalize off of the previous person's experience. So he's in the limelight. I'm going to be in the limelight. We've seen stories like this with I Love Lucy. We've seen Aisha Curry do this, where you have a person in the limelight, a person who wants to keep them out of the limelight. I don't believe she has a job, but she's trying to be a podcaster. Well, this is important because they are married, but their marriage seems to be weird, all right, for all intents and purposes, because of an interesting dynamic. Now, we'll show you a couple things here. He was on a podcast with another comedian named Andrew Schultz. I don't know the podcast name, but I better watch it. All right, but there's Andrew Schultz here, and there's Akash here. They were like Batman and Robin on the podcast, although I believe there were a couple of other comedians on there as well. None of them I recognize, but shout out to them, no disrespect. Akash was on the podcast with Andrew Schultz, but you see Myron and Myron and Walter. Myron and Walter appeared on their podcast when they were doing the podcast too, right? So at one point when Fresh and Fit were trying to get over a million subscribers, they went on a podcast tour, and this is where they got in trouble. I don't know if you remember that. They were doing relatively well on YouTube, still associated kind of with the mainstream, but they wanted to go mainstream. And what they did was they went on a podcast tour. They paid their own way and sometimes paid their way onto the podcast. They gave them a little bit of money and they went on the tour. This is about 4 years ago. And a lot of the clips that came out and got Myron in trouble and recognized and were because they were going on these tours. Now, the podcasts that they were going on tours with were not so red pill, right? They were not understanding of the talking points of the red pill. They might have heard a couple here and there. This is before Andrew Tate was completely popular. This is kind of like around the same time. This is while Kevin Samuels was kind of getting popular as well. So they were going on podcasts, but they were completely friendly with them. They were friendly, but they weren't. So they would sometimes go to podcasts like Tim Pool. Sometimes they were uniform, sometimes they were confronting. They went on the podcast with a husband and a wife community, and they kind of tore into Myron and Fresh. A lot of the clips that you saw about people saying negative things about them came from these podcasts too. In this particular tour, Andrew Schultz, they were invited on that podcast, but Akash took great exception to what Myron and Fresh were talking about. I mean, he went in on them, and I do have the clip. The reason why that's important is because that set off the chain of events of the exposure of Akash. It's kind of like when Abba goes in on other dudes, and now he's in this situation, and now it's coming back to him because he's looking like a hypocrite. Well, Akash ends up looking like a Super Saiyan 6 because he went in hardcore on Myron. So, and I think No Jumper is another one of these podcasts they went on. So he went in hardcore on Myron. Now, Myron, as you guys know, right, he don't forget. And Myron does this for real. Like a lot of people do podcasting part-time and y'all do it as a hobby. Like this is Myron's life. Right? He ain't playing. He does podcasting. And he ain't gonna read up with that. Like that's his life. So he never forgot. And that came back to Akash because even Akash's fans would support what he said against Myron. They could not ignore what came out of the Myron case. Alright, so Akash is known as a cynic. Even his own viewers on his own podcast would not let it go that Akash is in a simping relationship with his wife. So even though they don't agree with the red pill, they can agree that Akash is a simp. So much so that Akash just quit his podcast with Andrew Schultz. He just quit. According to the internet, Akash is getting somewhere around $100,000 a month from this podcast. This is people.
How's it going, child guy? Aficionado. Aficionado
from this podcast. Now he's also a stand-up comedian. He just sold out a big New York venue of 10,000 seats. Now, if you do the math and the tickets,
it's just loading, guys.
He got a bag, but that's not going to sustain him. Most of these comedians need YouTube. If you think of all the comedians on YouTube, these people don't perform all the time. You had Eddie Spears, podcast. He was on Vlad. You had Godfrey. He has a podcast. You had Andrew Schultz has a podcast. Cat Williams blew up Shannon Sharp podcast. All right, Joe Rogan podcast. So a lot of these comedians use the podcast in place of having to go on and tour everything and nightclubs with 850 people. That's an 350 people. So this concept, you need to go out on the road to reach your fans. You don't just go out to do their podcast. So they have a built-in fan base and you do the podcast. That's the way. You can play the podcast. So thank you for taking that. So you're seeing the need of the community to use the podcast. To keep themselves relevant, to keep themselves in the net. If people are on a platform, to get them now, because you start out radio city music now. I think that you use the podcast as a way. But because he got into this situation where his own audience called him a simp, and his whole conversation was about filled up again, and he decided to quit the podcast. Why is that important? Well, if a significant amount of his income is talking about to support his wife, to support his marriage, he's going to have to do a whole bunch of comedy shows to support him, to support him. And then here you go. So he's
that shit ain't cool, man.
Shout out to Chris Rock. So she's shopping. She has a lifestyle. She has a whole money. She be shopping. She be out Pilates. She be out here shopping for clothes. And she is up on the purses and handbags. Or Gucci and Louis Vuitton bags. And then she is selling on clothes. And she is at Pilates. And she is doing all these people. And she is traveling, vacation. And she is on vacation. Right? And that's a quick one. So that's an example of when he got the money to become the house.
Back on a bit.
Your career. And he's still staying like my career is not good. I still sold out Radio City Music Hall. 10,000 seats. So not to him. It's not easy to do. But can you do that every weekend? No. Can you do that every weekend? No. So that's why people are saying your marriage depends on this, because if you don't make no more money, guess what she's gonna do? You gotta get my bag and run. She'll get her bag and run. Especially the dynamic of the relationship. Now let me play this video so you can see how like people are calling this dynamic simple. There's a lot of reasons there. But this is what I'm going to go over. So that's all I know. The video that I played earlier of their dynamic. And the reason why we're talking about this is we're trying to hope we're understand where you gotta see this in the outside of the world. So this is him with his wife. This is him trying to run for a kiss on his wife, and she turns her head. This is him again getting down on one knee proposing. And this is him trying to get a kiss, and she turns her head. She turns her head. There he is trying to get a kiss again. She's turning her head right there. There he is again. This is a wife who claims to be a virgin. We're going to handle that later. She was a virgin at marriage. This is moving away and from a kiss while they're on the social media. Remember, social media is their job. So she got again. Remember that woman was saying about you need to for your man? Right? For the NFL player? She needs to decide right? So there she is moving away, dodging again, and there he is just getting it here, and there she is. Disgusting. Pretty terrible, right? This is going to be probably some sort of video or live stream, so he decides to go on the other side. And she is again. I don't know what juice is, but let alone my life. And she said money. And so this is even Abba and Preach recognizing that this is bad news. If you get Abba and Preach, okay, damn.
Son of a bitch.
So let's go back here and talk about Fresh, Fit, Myron, and the College. So next, all makes sense. This is whatever that guy's name is, and the cops right here. This is them on the show. The podcast is called Film. This was posted. Well, I don't remember when the interview was, but I saw it on 2021, 2022. So let's hear what the podcast is saying.
I didn't even shoot that bitch, dude.
I think it's fuck this kind of cool. It is. I saw a clip where you're like, oh, the nuclear family's falling apart. What do? I don't get married. Just don't get married. I mean, that's what you said in college. You came from sick people. Alright, bro. Can we grow up? You guys are self-help. If you are, hey, we're trying to help men. So either we're funny or help men. And be real and be honest with yourself. And don't have an ego like, no, I just, I have a preference. Be honest. Have an honest conversation.
All right, so that was the original beef from that particular point of view. So you can see Myron has carried this for years because that's how Myron works. Myron, don't forget, he carries that on. He also believes in loyalty. As you can see, most of his beefs has come from men he thought were loyal to him, and then they turned on him, and from his point of view. Okay, so there was the original statement that was like, wow. Now, why is that important? This is not to defend Myron. This is not to defend Fresh. This is not to defend Akash or Andrew Schultz. That led to what we saw of the exposure of Akash. Because Myron and his group of men, because he always has a group of men over there, they ended up producing a clip of Akash's greatest miss. So his clipper, or Myron, or whoever put this together, ended up pushing out this particular clip, exposing the real dynamic relationship between Akash and Jack Boomer. So
I get so thinking.
I'm so happy we're lucky this time.
now remember, this woman is the same woman that dodges kisses from him in public. On camera, on screens, in public. She's also saying these things about her husband. There's a little bit more and gets worse. Remember when the woman said how to get an NFL player? One of the things she said, and I keep saying this, and a lot of women don't do it, don't embarrass him, okay? Be seen, not heard. Always look good and appealing. Be pretty and smile. What happens is, what you really want to do is, I might be a podcast too. It's easy work. You just sit there and talk. I can sit there and talk too. So what happened was, Andrew Schultz, I believe it was, I might be wrong, that because they had this marriage, and they had the ability to put her up on a podcast, they created a podcast anyway because she wanted to do it. And the podcast wouldn't say, you see my heard, you want to go up there and do a podcast. And guess what? Boom. She went there and destroyed it. What we see is the result of him not putting her foot. She's not saying, no, I'm the star. You sit over there and you can't lose. You sit over there and you embarrass the team. You sit sit over there and be a wife. He did pull her car, and guess what? She jumped up on outdoor internet. This is another reason why he say, I never really have one. Because it won't America. You see a lot of babies like media to put their car to the You see other leaders. And these are detrimental to the marriage. This is why you start talking to yourself. So, she's a victim. In fact, if you look at her Instagram and her TikTok, which I think I looked at, I cannot believe the numbers were so low. I was like, what? She got 190,000 TikTok. I mean, I got over 100,000 TikTok. And she get all this exposure. Still can't even say my own. But her activity for generate her interest, and then you get her out there just to put her Gucci as she said in the room. But see how she's doing it. Her Instagram has 34,000 followers. So I got what, 157? I don't know. I'm going to put all of her, but she's done more dollars for her name, and he's done more Instagram for his name. Alright, so let's continue looking at this video of her destroying us. And this is why his whole audience is coming out.
Everything comes with those things. They got her.
Hey, where's she going?
She's talking about this woman's her podcast host. On the podcast where she's so she's talking about this woman, her podcast host.
One more game, guys.
Do you watch when you use it?
Okay, not gonna lie, I don't watch television. What? I just think my imagination is vibration enough.
What?
It seems like my own husband while I'm like doing it.
Wait, that's kind of baller, but I could never do that.
All right, so is this is being censored out so you can barely understand sometimes. So she's asking, who do you think about when you use your vibrator? And the woman said, I think about my husband, obviously. And she said, I could never do that. I could never think about my husband. Wow, bro. I mean, she trashing him. And by the way, Myron Kemp is the one who exposed this. And he exposed this years later after he got bit by a cop. And I'm pretty sure he tried to send the job. But she is grilling this. When you combine that, and there's more, guys. There's more.
Yeah.
This comment is so gross to me. Excuse my face, I just got a Fraxel, so it looks a little crazy, but it's like, who the f are you to talk about when I lost my virginity? I will talk about it because it's my sexuality and it's my story, so sit the f down and shut the f up. And also, do you think Akash never touched a woman before he met me? Like, we both with people, we both were in relationships, and then together we both lost our virginity. So
All right, so she's claiming, this is an important part, she's claiming they lost their virginities together. All right, but they also were with other people prior. This is kind of like goes down the hill of, they be lying about their past. So I don't know what virginity you talking about, but let's continue here. This is her talking about her being a virgin. All right, so here we go right here. Did we hear about the frat boys? We didn't hear about the frat boys.
is weird about periods. That's a red flag. Break up with him immediately, from the edit. Because when I was in college, I dated this guy. He didn't want to fool around when I was on the heaviest days of my period. Okay, totally understandable. I get that. And I was like, oh great, good news, my period ended. We can have that myself. He was coming down. Before no one I was so fine. Looking around down there, you don't realize you sometimes come out even if your period is over and you feel it. It looked at me with so much distress, and I'll never forget that moment. I felt so ashamed and so And I had my boyfriend. And I was like, so depressed. I had my sister. Like, this happened to me. And she literally was like, so? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, Jesse, that's so normal. Like, yeah, sometimes you spot. Like, why would you make it such a big deal? And